Today, we're going to talk about a quote that I really like. It says, "Cruelty is weakness dressed as strength." And I want to unpack this for you. This has so many layers to it. So let's get into it. I think most people can agree with this statement in theory, but there's some caveats here that I want to discuss with you because it's not always as black and white in practice. Let's start by talking about what cruelty is. When we look up the definition of cruelty, it's the quality of being cruel. What is cruel? It means willfully doing something that causes pain or suffering. Now, the key word here is willfully. If someone does something that causes pain or suffering accidentally, we wouldn't call them cruel. Maybe they're clumsy, maybe they're reckless, maybe they're careless, but we wouldn't call them cruel. But when we do something that causes pain or suffering willfully, meaning on purpose, then we are being cruel. Now, let's take a look at the second part of this quote, which is weakness. What does it mean for something to be a weakness? A weakness could be defined as a lack of strength, either mental or physical. For example, if someone was going through a divorce, going through grief, perhaps someone passed away, they may be emotionally vulnerable during that time. They may have a reduced ability to cope with the stressors of life because they're going through something difficult. That would be an example of emotional weakness. If we accept that definition of weakness, then we can say that cruelty is weakness dressed as strength. Someone who is emotionally weak, someone who is going through grief, who is vulnerable, might lash out. They might be cruel. They might do something that causes pain or suffering to others, but they're doing it from a place of weakness. They're doing it because they don't have the emotional strength to deal with what it is that they're dealing with. They don't have the mental strength to process their emotions healthily, so they lash out. That would be one example of what this quote could mean, that cruelty is weakness dressed as strength. But there's another layer here. When someone is cruel, when someone is lashing out and causing pain and suffering to others, it actually further weakens them. So what I mean by that is, imagine you're in a relationship with someone who is emotionally weak and they're lashing out. They're being cruel. They're doing things that cause you pain. You may be empathetic towards them. You may be compassionate because you know they're going through something difficult, but that doesn't change the fact that you're getting hurt. You're experiencing pain. And if you were in a long-term relationship with that person, maybe a marriage, and they started becoming more and more cruel, more and more abusive, more and more controlling, you may eventually come to a point where you decide you need to leave that relationship, right? Because it's not healthy for you anymore. You can't keep living like this. You can't keep getting hurt by this person. And when you make that decision to leave, it actually makes you stronger. It makes you more resilient. So what we have is this dynamic where someone is acting cruelly, they're acting from a place of weakness, and their cruelty actually causes the other person to become stronger. So in that case, you could say that the strength actually comes from the weakness. So that's one interpretation of what this quote could mean. Another way to look at this quote is to think about what it means for something to be strong. Strength could be defined as something that is firm and rigid, as opposed to weak, which is more flexible and adaptable. For example, a diamond is considered to be one of the strongest minerals on Earth because it's very hard and rigid. If you were to try to bend a diamond, you would probably break it. On the other hand, bamboo is considered to be one of the weakest minerals on Earth because it's very flexible and adaptable. If you were to try to bend some bamboo, you would probably be able to do it without breaking it. Now, diamonds are known for their hardness and durability. They're used in industrial cutting tools because they can withstand a lot of pressure. However, if you were to take a diamond and expose it to high temperature, it would actually start to break down. On the other hand, if you took bamboo and exposed it to high temperature, it would actually become stronger. The higher the temperature, the stronger the bamboo would become. What I just described is exactly how it is with our emotions. When we're exposed to high levels of stress for a prolonged period of time, we can reach a breaking point. We can become overwhelmed, and we may lash out. We may become cruel in our actions or in our words. We may do things that cause pain or suffering to those around us simply because we've reached our breaking point. We've become too hard, too rigid, too stressed out. On the other hand, when we're able to go within and look at our emotions, when we're able to process them, when we're able to sit in that space of discomfort and just feel it, we become stronger. So in this case, the strength comes from the weakness. The flexibility, the adaptability, the willingness to go within and look at our emotions makes us stronger. It makes us more resilient to future stressors. So what I want you to take away from this video is that there's always more than meets the eye. There's always more to a situation than what we see on the surface. If someone is being cruel, if someone is lashing out, causing pain and suffering to those around them, it may be easy for us to judge them, to criticize them. But if we take the time to look deeper, we may find that that person is actually in a lot of pain. They may be going through something that we don't know about. And even if that's not the case, even if someone is being cruel and we know that they don't have a good reason for it, we can still take a lesson from it. We can learn from it and become better ourselves. One thing that we can do is to remember that sometimes strength comes from unexpected places. Sometimes our greatest weaknesses can actually be our greatest strengths. So I want you to ask yourself this question. What areas of your life do you struggle with? What are your weaknesses, and how can you turn those weaknesses into strengths? How can you use them to make you a better person, to make you more resilient in the face of adversity? The last thing I want to say is that this quote is not meant to justify cruelty in any way. Cruelty is never okay. But understanding the psychology behind it, understanding the motivations behind it, can help us to be more compassionate towards others, but also towards ourselves. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it helpful, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.